This is Lauren Graves bringing you the coaching cycle, identifying the landmarks, and plotting the final destination. So really the process that we used to come up with our coaching cycle was outlined in our class. The first part, identifying the landmarks, and then the second part, plotting the final destination. So the first focus of this presentation is really to demonstrate how we collaboratively work together, the master teacher and my teacher resident, how we looked at what she needed and what the students needed and came together to try to create a really good student-centered coaching cycle goal. The second section is going to be about how we're going to use steps to get to that goal and how we're going to complete the coaching cycle and the timeline and the assessments and all of the nitty-gritty of the cycle. So let's start with section. So where do we start? We used some of the resources from Diane Sweeney's website that was all about student-centered toolkit, coaching toolkit, and there were so many great resources. We used some, we came up with our own, but it really was a good place to help us start. What we did while we were collaborating was think about what we had as far as student data, what we had noticed about what our students could and could not do, and then also the needs assessment for the teacher resident. And by looking at those things, we were able to narrow it down to 3 big areas for her needs assessments. One of them was the behavior management skills, another one was pacing the lesson, and a third area was asking higher order questioning skills. She really felt like she needed to work in that area. So based on those 3 things, we focused on, okay, what are the students showing us that they can and cannot do? So as we're looking through the student data, one of the things we were thinking about was guided reading groups and how she had these 3 specific guided reading groups. One was a low group, one was a high group, one was a on-level group. So they were really a perfect chunk of students, good subset of students, but also they were struggling in just comprehension. They were really, all 3 levels are reading fluently and accurately within their level, but their comprehension skills were lacking. They were not getting proficient on their comprehension skills. So this was a really great area to hone in on, and it was a good subset of students. So we thought about what the teacher resident needed, what the students needed, and we came up with a student-centered collaborative coaching goal. Our goal is for the 12 students in the teacher resident's guided reading groups to increase their ability to respond to on-level text comprehension questions from 25% proficiency, which is where they're beginning, to 80% proficiency at the end of the coaching cycle, while the teacher resident is increasing her ability to ask and provide feedback for higher order thinking questions. So that's a mouthful, but basically we want the students' reading comprehension question ability to increase to 80% proficiency. Now again, their accuracy and fluency is proficient. They're lacking in this area of comprehension, and it's not just the high group or the low group, it's each group. They're reading the words accurately, they are reading with a good fluent speed, but they're not really getting those deeper meaning questions. So our big idea, we're going to focus on the higher order thinking skills, we're going to focus on question stems, and response stems to help them to better comprehend their on-level texts. So here we go, section 2, plotting the final destination. Now we have to figure out all of the details of everything. So what is it we even want it to look like when we're done? So the teacher resident and I went through and talked about what will show us what they know. So when the students can respond to the higher order thinking questions with thoughtful responses, the students can respond to them with accuracy. The teacher resident, we want her to be able to ask these questions with ease, be able to gauge the responses, not just good job, but ask a follow-up question. And also we want to be able to see that the students increase their running record comprehension scores from 25%, which is where they are of the whole group. There's 25% of them at approaching proficiency or proficiency. And we want 80% of this group to be able to do that. So here are some of the coaching practices I will be putting into action. I'll be observing her small groups with feedback. I'll be modeling these questioning skills in my small groups where she can also observe me. We will be co-planning these small groups weekly, and we'll also check up during the week to see how things are going, if we need to make any changes. We will also look at the student data and we will analyze things, and I will teach her how to better analyze student data by grouping different things and being able to look deeper instead of just, is it right, is it wrong, what did they provide, and what areas do they need more work with. And also my plan for coaching is to help create and provide her with resources. So the 3 main skills we're thinking about that the master teacher, myself, will need to create and provide some resources for: the higher order thinking skills, question stems, and response stems. So some of the resources I have already found that I either already had or made were some different responses to questions. Some of them are card games that they can answer the questions. And then also we have some ideas for the master teacher and the teacher resident to use to show what effective questioning skills are. And again, we have some more examples of nonfiction, beyond the text questions. They're doing okay within the text, but it's beyond that we're really struggling with. Some of we made some cards that we will cut into smaller sections that the students will be able to draw a card to answer questions that are not just the first 3 levels of Bloom's taxonomy, but the higher 3 levels of evaluating. And also we created a generic question response sheet that we can use for any text that they're working with. So even the lower students, whatever text they're working with, the higher students, whatever text they're working with, these questions will relate, and they are higher order thinking questions. And then of course we have our running records, which is another resource that she will be providing. So the next part to think about are the roles. What will my role be, and what will the teacher resident's role be? For the teacher resident, she's going to definitely have to engage the students, use the resources provided. If she wants to find more or create, that's great too. She's going to need to assess the students to see if they're reaching their goal, teach the lessons, and she and I are going to have to touch base and do the weekly updates. For my role, I'm going to help create the resources, provide other resources that I haven't created, provide feedback, assist with assessing the students so that we can see exactly where they are, go through with the coaching methods and strategies, model lessons for her to be able to watch me, and do the weekly updates. So we are going to have 3 major data points with some checkups within. The pre-data was based on the running records that we already had completed for the students, and the area that we noticed that they were low is the comprehension sections. They were doing great on the accuracy and the fluency, but then we would get to the comprehension and they could only answer partial sections. So that's the pre-data. The during data, we're going to use some of the resources that I've made or that we have found, and we're going to also complete some midway running records just to see where we are and where we're going. And then finally, the teacher residents guiding reading groups will be assessed with the running records again at the end. Now, these will be the right levels for each student, but they will not be the same text. They will be different texts each time, so it's not the exact same running. So for an example, the first one here is the pre-data. We use the Fountas and Pinnell running records that are our district requirements. The during data are some of the teacher-made resources and the teacher-made responses. And the post data will use a different Fountas and Pinnell running record, again, which is required from the district. So how am I going to help support the teacher resident? Well, some of the strategies that we've been learning about and reading about in the Mentoring in Action book by Radford are really great. One of the things that we saw in the video last week where there was a coach and a coachee was observing the midpoint feedback, midpoint feedback, where you are checking in during the middle of the observation, not later or 2 or 3 or 4 days later, but right then, and saying what's working, what could we adjust. The noticing and naming strategy is a great strategy from Radford, and the strength-based feedback is another strategy I plan on using. The safeguards, I will be trying to observe the guided reading lessons to ensure that the skills are properly being delivered. And also we're going to check in weekly to discuss progress and see where we need to go from there. So the timeline looks a little like this. Before the cycle began, we did the collaborative meeting, the goal setting, we analyzed the data. The collaborative meeting was from the Student Centered Coaching book, and the goal setting was also from Sweeney's Student Centered Coaching book. Weeks 1 and 2, there will be collaborative planning, creating resources, coaching strategies. We'll do a midpoint assessment. And then weeks 3 and 4 will be a lot of the same thing, but it will be end of cycle assessment. Analyze the data. See, did we meet our goal? So in conclusion, the coaching cycle will focus on the needs of the teacher residents and the needs of the student. The objective will be for both the students to reach their student-centered goal, and for the teacher resident to finish the cycle with more knowledge and experience in using higher order thinking questioning skills. And on top of that, the icing on top will be that I will be learning more about how to coach and more effectively, and how to just focus on all these aspects of it that we're learning as we go along through this process, and just to help me to be a better coach. And these are my resources that I use for planning of the cycle, and also within this PowerPoint.